There are certain moments that divide a person's life into two parts, before and after. For Emily Dawson, that moment arrived on a Thursday morning in the quiet town of Elmridge, New Hampshire. It began with something as ordinary as forgettable as an itch. Emily wasn't reckless. Not with her job, not with her apartment budget, and certainly not with her health. At 26, she had learned to keep her world neat, manageable, with clean lines and minimal surprises. She worked as an accountant at a local firm, taxes, audits, spreadsheets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, predictable. Which is why, when she began to feel a persistent discomfort, not quite pain, not quite irritation, but something that lingered, she didn't ignore it. She told herself it was probably just laundry detergent. Maybe that new body wash she bought on sale. But on day 4, after tossing and turning through another night, she texted her OB/GYN. Just in case. Can I come in tomorrow? Dr. Paul Eckhart responded within minutes. Of course. 10:45 a.m. Bring coffee, the waiting room's been boring lately. Emily chuckled at that. Dr. Eckhart had been her doctor since she was 19. A calming presence, mid-60s, white beard neatly trimmed, and always wore bow ties like he was headed to a jazz recital. He was the kind of doctor who remembered your cat's name and told terrible jokes during exams just to make you laugh. So when Friday came, Emily wasn't nervous. She drove her beat-up Honda Civic to the little 2-story clinic tucked behind the florist and the donut shop. The sign on the door still read "Closed Wednesdays," like time didn't move too quickly here. She signed in at the front desk, exchanged pleasantries with Maggie the nurse, and took her usual seat near the window. Southern light streamed in soft and warm. On her lap, she opened her phone, idly scrolling through emails, dating app messages, credit card notifications she didn't want to deal with. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that told her her life was about to split in half. When Dr. Eckhart called her in, he greeted her with a warm smile. Still keeping the books for Harding and Company? Yep. Still dreaming of one day setting the spreadsheets on fire. They laughed. Everything was familiar. Until it wasn't. She lay on the exam table, staring at the acoustic tile ceiling, legs in stirrups, gown tucked around her thighs. Dr. Eckhart talked gently, something about his daughter's wedding planning disasters and the absolute tyranny of Pinterest. And then, silence. Not long. Just long enough. Long enough to make her heart skip. Then he said it, the phrase that every patient dreads. Huh. Not okay, not all good, not you'll feel a slight pressure. Just a ha, followed by a pause and a subtle shift in his tone. Emily tensed. Everything okay? She asked, her voice trying to stay casual. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he adjusted the light, leaned in slightly and squinted, brows drawing together just enough to cause concern. There was something foreign. That was his word later. Foreign. At first, it didn't register. A shape, maybe a clot? Something tissue-like but off-color. Then he saw a glint. Red. Glossy. Sure. And then, the nail. What he removed next would never make sense. Dr. Eckhart didn't scream. He didn't panic. Decades of practice had trained him for chaos, and even now he was careful. Come. He told her, slowly, cautiously, that something unusual had been found and that he was going to remove it carefully. Emily felt a strange tug, a pressure. Then a pause. Then something even more terrifying. The nurse beside him turning pale, stepping back, one hand covering her mouth. What is it? Emily asked, sitting up slightly. Dr. Eckhart held a gauze-wrapped object in trembling fingers. He looked at her and said 4 words she would never forget. It's a human fingertip. Time stopped. Emily stared at him. She couldn't comprehend. Couldn't process. She blinked, swallowed, blinked again. Excuse me? But he was already standing, already directing Maggie to lock the door, call the sheriff, and prevent anyone from entering or leaving. The room was no longer a clinic. It was a crime scene. Emily's body recoiled, instinctively curling into itself. She shook her head violently. No, no, no. That's not possible. That's not. I mean, what are you saying? That someone? Dr. Eckhart knelt beside her, kept his voice low. I don't know how it got there, Emily, but we have to treat this seriously. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't medical. Someone put it there. She felt her stomach lurch. Tears welled up and fell before she even realized she was crying. Her mind raced, grasping at logic, memory, anything that could explain this. She had only been with one man in the last 6 months. One man who had her trust, her affection. Nathan Bell. Her boyfriend of almost 5 months. A chef. Sweet. Private. Thoughtful. Her thoughts screamed he would never, but something deeper, something darker, stirred quietly beneath that, and whispered, "Are you sure?" Outside, sirens approached. The red and blue lights began flashing through the frosted glass. Inside, Emily Dawson sat on the cold exam table, her paper gown crinkling beneath her trembling hands. She had come in for a routine checkup. And now nothing in her life, not her body, not her mind, not her idea of safety, would ever be the same. It took 12 minutes for the first squad car to pull up in front of Elmridge Women's Health Center. Sheriff Tom Briggs had seen a lot in his 25 years on the job: bar fights, break-ins, missing hikers. Once, he'd dealt with a triple homicide that rattled the whole county. But this, a human body part discovered during a routine gynecological exam, wasn't something his training manual had ever prepared him for. When he stepped through the glass door, his boots crunching lightly against the sterile floor, Nurse Maggie handed him a sealed evidence bag. Her hands trembled. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Dr. Eckhart removed this from inside the patient. Briggs looked down at the gauze-wrapped object through the clear plastic. It was small, flesh-colored. At first glance, it might have passed for a prosthetic. But then the light caught on the tip, a dark red acrylic nail, cracked and worn, and the illusion shattered. "You're telling me this came out of her?" Dr. Eckhart nodded, his expression distant, like he was still trying to believe it himself. "Yes." It wasn't embedded deep, but it was placed deliberately. Briggs exhaled slowly. The room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps in when something unnatural has been discovered. Inside the exam room, Emily Dawson was seated on the table, her knees pulled tight to her chest, hospital gown wrinkled beneath her. She wasn't crying anymore, just staring at the floor, her mouth slightly open as if her thoughts couldn't keep up with her body. Briggs knelt beside her chair. His tone was calm, like he was trying to coax a deer out of traffic. "Miss Dawson, I'm Sheriff Briggs. I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you a few questions. Just answer the best you can, all right?" She didn't look at him at first. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "Am I going to die?" Briggs shook his head gently. "No, ma'am. You're not under arrest. You're not in trouble. But we need to figure out how that fingertip got inside you." Emily finally raised her head. Her eyes were red, lashes clumped with dried tears, mascara smeared beneath them like soot. Her lips parted. "I don't know. I don't understand any of this. I've only been with one person, in the last 6 months. Can you tell me his name?" She hesitated. And in that pause, something shifted behind her eyes, a quiet devastation settling in. "Nathan Bell," she said. "He's a chef. We met at a food truck downtown." Briggs scribbled it down. "Do you live together?" "No. But I've stayed over at his place. A few times." "When was the last time you were intimate with him?" 3 nights ago." Her voice cracked. "At his apartment. It wasn't violent. I would have known if something was wrong." Briggs looked over at Maggie, then back to Emily. He knew all too well. Victims often didn't notice what they weren't looking for, especially when they trusted the person beside them. "Has he ever hurt you before?" Emily shook her head sharply. "No, never. He texts me good morning. He cooks for me. He opens my car door. Does he live alone?" "As far as I know, but..." She paused again. That flicker in her eyes, that thread from earlier, began tugging again. "There's a second bedroom." Briggs leaned in slightly. "Second bedroom?" "He always kept the door shut. Said it was just storage. Messy. I didn't push." Briggs closed his notebook slowly. That was enough. He stood, his voice steadier now, the kind that signaled procedure had just turned into a criminal investigation. "We're going to look into Mr. Bell. We'll send a detective to speak with him. For now, you'll be escorted home. Try not to be alone if you can help it." Emily looked up again. "Is someone going to tell me how a finger ended up inside me?" Briggs crouched to meet her eye level. "We don't know yet," he said gently. "But I promise you, we're going to find out." By nightfall, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had looped in 2 senior agents, Detective Sarah Hanley and her partner, Detective Carlos Ruiz. They'd worked together long enough to communicate in glances, not words. The fingertip had already been rushed to the state lab under urgent priority. Preliminary scans confirmed it was cleanly severed, with ligature marks that suggested removal post-mortem. The nail was synthetic. The polish, deep red, chipped, not factory applied. Whoever the finger belonged to, she had once painted it herself. Back at her apartment, Emily sat in the dark, staring at her phone. There were no messages from Nathan. No, "Hey beautiful." "No, you okay?" She typed. "Nathan, can we talk?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. And that, Emily would later say, was the moment something shifted inside her. When the man who once felt like home suddenly felt like a stranger. 5 miles across town, inside a modest brick apartment, that stranger, Nathan Bell, stood in his hallway staring at a closed door. A bottle of red nail polish still sat on the dresser inside. Unopened. Waiting. They didn't kick down the door. They didn't need to. Detectives Sarah Hanley and Carlos Ruiz approached apartment 3B at 6:42 p.m., warrant in hand, clipboards tucked beneath their coats, and a quiet weight in the air between them. This wasn't just a boyfriend check-in anymore. This was now officially a crime scene investigation. Inside, Nathan Bell answered the door like he'd just come out of a nap. Sweatpants, white t-shirt, tousled hair, spatula still dangling from one hand. The warm smell of rosemary and butter drifted out from the open kitchen behind him. He blinked at them for a moment as if puzzled, then smiled. "Something I can help you with?" Hanley stepped forward, badge flipped open. "Nathan Bell?" "Yes, ma'am." "Detective Hanley. This is my partner, Detective Ruiz. Mind if we come in?" There was a flicker, just a flicker, in Nathan's eyes. Not panic. Not even fear. Just the smallest shift in posture, like a subtle breath drawn deeper than usual. And then the smile returned. "Sure. Of course. What's this about?" "We just need to ask you a few questions," Ruiz said evenly. The apartment was spotless. Too spotless. Modern furniture. Neatly arranged spice rack. A single framed photo on the bookshelf. Nathan and Emily standing in front of a food truck. Cotton candy in her hand, her head resting gently on his shoulder. A scene frozen in time, warm, harmless. But Hanley had been doing this too long to trust warmth that arrived too early. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway. One door at the end. Closed. No visible handle marks. No scuffs. Hinges recently oiled. Nathan followed her gaze, chuckled lightly. "That's just storage. I've been meaning to organize it, but you know how it goes." She nodded politely. "Do you mind if we sit?" "Go ahead." He motioned to the couch and set the spatula down by the sink, wiping his hands on a towel with casual ease. Hanley opened her notepad. "You're currently in a relationship with Emily Dawson, correct?" "Yeah." Nathan smiled faintly. "She's great. Is she okay?" "I tried texting her earlier, but she didn't respond. I was starting to wonder." Ruiz cut in. "She came in for a routine medical exam this morning, and something concerning came up. That's why we're here." Nathan's smile didn't vanish, but it faltered. Slightly. "Concerning? Do you know a woman named Carmen Wells?" Hanley asked. That did it. His spine stiffened. Barely a millimeter, but enough for Hanley to catch. She always caught the micro-expressions. "We dated. A while ago. She disappeared, I guess. That was a long time ago." "April Wells reported her missing in March 2021, Ruiz said calmly. "Do you recall giving a statement to local officers back then?" Nathan leaned back. "Yeah. They said she probably ran off with some guy. I told them we had a fight and she left. I didn't know anything more than that." Hanley stared at him. "And you've kept nothing of hers? No photos? No personal items?" "No. I moved on." He gestured loosely toward the cotton candy photo. "I've been focused on Emily." Hanley leaned in. "You ever keep souvenirs, Nathan?" That stopped him. His mouth parted. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind that gets asked," Ruiz replied, "when a severed fingertip is found inside your girlfriend's body." The room dropped in temperature. For the first time, Nathan's face lost all color. "What did you say?" "Red acrylic nail. Found this morning. Identified as human remains. That's why we're here." Nathan stood up quickly, pacing. "That's insane. That's not even possible. I would never hurt Emily. I love her." Hanley stayed seated. "We'd like your permission to search the apartment." He froze. "Do you have a warrant?" "Not yet. We're asking first." His hand stayed up, undecided, between fight or fold. After a long pause, he sighed. "Fine. But you're wasting your time." While Ruiz stepped out to radio the search team, Hanley wandered, carefully, toward the closed door. Nathan moved fast. Not aggressive. Just sudden. He stood between her and the handle. "I said you can look," he said, voice tight. "But I'd appreciate it if you waited for your team." Hanley smiled gently. But her eyes said, "You just gave me your answer." 15 minutes later, uniformed officers arrived. The search warrant was signed. The door was unlocked. And the lie unraveled. Inside the room wasn't clutter. It wasn't storage. It was preserved. Like a shrine. A small white vanity table against the wall. A hairbrush with long dark strands. A half-empty bottle of deep red nail polish. A cracked mirror. And hanging neatly from a hook, a denim jacket with a faded patch that read, "Stay bold." Ruiz opened the closet. A pair of red high heels. A silk scarf. A leather-bound journal. A necklace with initials engraved, C.W. Carmen Wells. There was no dust. No disarray. Everything had been cleaned, arranged, almost worshipped. On the couch outside, Nathan Bell sat motionless. Eyes fixed on the wall. Lips tight. When Hanley returned from the room, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. She held up the necklace in one gloved hand, the initials glinting faintly beneath the ceiling fan. "I think you and I both know what happens next." Nathan looked at her. His voice came out low. "Hello. She was going to leave me." Pause. "Said I wasn't enough. Said I didn't deserve someone like her. So you kept her?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the photo of Emily on the shelf. "I tried to be better with Emily. I really did." Hanley's voice hardened. "You put a dead woman's body part inside her." And for the first time, Nathan didn't flinch. Didn't deny. He simply slumped back into the couch. Like a man relieved that the secret had finally crushed him. Before she became a name on a report or a whisper in an interrogation room, Carmen Wells was fire. That's how her sister April described her. Not the kind that burned buildings, but the kind that warmed a cold room just by stepping into it. Carmen had that laugh, high, clear, just a little too loud, the kind that turned heads and dared anyone not to smile with her. She wore red lipstick like armor and walked like the street belonged to her, even in heels 2 sizes too small. She'd grown up just a few blocks from the high school gym she used to clean at night to save up for cosmetology school. She had plans. Big ones. A nail salon, her own brand of polish, maybe even her own podcast, Red Queen Diaries, she once joked. "I'll make women feel invincible, one manicure at a time." And she meant it. She called every woman queen. She danced barefoot at family barbecues. She read tarot cards half seriously at brunch. But underneath the shine, Carmen was soft. She gave too many second chances. Believed too easily in broken men who said, "I'm just figuring it out." That was how Nathan Bell got in. They met at a pop-up tasting in 2020. He worked the grill. She ordered steak tacos and stayed for the charm. He wasn't like the others, she said. He listened. Asked about her dreams. Remembered the name of her cat. On their second date, he made her breakfast at midnight. By their third, she already had a toothbrush at his place. Within 3 months, she'd moved in. By month 5, her friends were seeing less of her. By month 6, she was gone. When Carmen disappeared, it was April who raised the alarm. She called the police the morning after Carmen missed their weekly coffee meetup, something they'd done every Saturday for 6 years. Carmen never missed it. Not once. But that week, no show, no call, no text. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The police filed it. Standard missing adult protocol. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Her car still in Nathan's driveway, her phone found a week later in a storm drain, wiped clean. Nathan told officers they'd had an argument and she walked out. That she said she was heading to Miami. "I figured she needed space," he told them. She was dramatic like that. Without a body, without blood, without a confession, the case cooled. The file slipped backward in a drawer. April kept calling. Posting online. Lighting candles on her sister's birthday. She never stopped saying Carmen's name. But after 2 years, even her own voice began to sound like an echo. Until now. At the state crime lab, the fingertip pulled from Emily Dawson had been fast-tracked. It took less than 72 hours. A DNA match. Carmen Wells. Detective Hanley had to pull over when the call came through. The tech on the other end repeated it twice. Hanley wrote it down. Spelled it back. Asked for the cross-confirmation from the missing persons database. It was her. The fingertip had spoken. Emily sat in the debriefing room like a person trying to shrink into the edges of her skin. The moment Hanley told her the truth, told her whose finger had been inside her body, Emily didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just went still. "She was inside me," she whispered. "A woman I've never met. Someone he. She couldn't finish. Hanley didn't push. She just sat across the table, voice quiet. "That's not on you. You didn't know. You couldn't have." But guilt isn't always rational. It clings like smoke in fabric. Emily pressed her palms against her stomach. She kept remembering the nights she spent with Nathan, the dinners, the jokes, the soft smiles, the way he made her feel seen. And now she knew he had been looking at her but thinking of someone else. Or worse, using her as storage. Back at the precinct, Hanley met with April Wells, Carmen's sister. April clutched her sister's photo like it might shatter if she let go. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "They told me they never found a body," she said. "But now you're telling me a piece of her was in another woman?" Hanley nodded. "It's enough. We can finally charge him. We can finally say her name in court." April wiped her eyes, then stared Hanley dead in the face. "Then make it count." And Hanley would. Because now the case wasn't cold. It was burning. Later that night, as evidence teams continued to process the apartment, Hanley returned to the shrine room. Every item was tagged and bagged. Carmen's red polish, her denim jacket, her cracked mirror. All items that should have faded with memory, now frozen in time by obsession. Hanley leaned over the vanity. There, tucked behind a stack of notebooks, she found something that made her throat tighten. A handwritten list, scrawled in delicate, precise cursive. At the top, what she loved. Warm cinnamon rolls, red nail polish, tap dancing when tipsy, Sunday cartoons, being called queen, laughing at bad jokes, making people feel seen. At the bottom, one entry was underlined 3 times. Red nails. Ruiz stepped in quietly, holding something heavy. "We found a freezer," he said. "Garage. Behind the shelf." Hanley's blood went cold. She followed him outside. Past the spice rack. Past the cotton candy photo. Down the stairs. The freezer was locked with a rusted padlock. Still humming. Inside were bags. Labeled, clean, vacuum sealed. 1 word each. Air. 2. Bone. Fingertip. 2. Now. Hanley turned away. Her hands shook. Ruiz whispered, "He kept her." "No," Hanley said, her jaw locked. "He dissected her life. And stored it like leftovers." The courtroom didn't smell like justice. It smelled like old wood, industrial carpet, and the faint scent of too many styrofoam coffee cups. But for Emily Dawson, sitting silently behind the prosecution's table, it was the only place where she might reclaim her name. Her skin still carried the echo of what had happened. Her body had been used, not as a person, not even as a partner, but as a container. And now, the man who had done that was sitting just a few feet away. Nathan Bell entered the courtroom in a gray suit that fit too well. His hair was neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. He looked like someone's polite neighbor, not like the man who had turned a freezer into a coffin. But Emily knew better. She had touched his hand, kissed his cheek, laughed at his stories. And he had buried a woman inside her. She didn't flinch when he looked at her. He didn't smile this time. The prosecutor, ADA Marcus Ellison, was calm and precise. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just one sentence to begin. "This is not a love story gone wrong. This is a story of control, obsession, and the desecration of 2 women." He let the silence linger. One woman was cut into pieces and stored like collectibles. The other was violated in the most unimaginable way, used as a vault to hide what was left of the first. Some jurors blinked slowly. Others shifted in their seats. He began with Carmen Wells, a woman who hadn't just disappeared, but had been systematically erased. Photos of her belongings were introduced carefully. Her red nail polish, her necklace, her journal. The freezer. The vacuum-sealed bags. Labels written in Nathan's handwriting. Then came the videos. Not all were shown. Some were deemed too disturbing. But enough played for the jury to understand what kind of mind they were dealing with. One clip showed Nathan speaking directly to the camera. "She said she was leaving. That she needed space. So I gave her a room she could never leave." The defense leaned on psychology. Nathan's attorney, a wiry man named Gerald Knox, painted a picture of trauma, abandonment, childhood neglect. He spoke of a mother who walked out, of a stepfather who punished silence with pain. He described a boy who learned to collect instead of connect. "My client didn't act out of cruelty," Knox insisted. "He acted out of fear, of loss, of being forgotten. What he needs is psychiatric treatment, not a life sentence." But trauma, as Ellison would later say, is not a hall pass for horror. When Emily took the stand, the room changed. She wore a navy blouse and black trousers. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. Her hands shook slightly when she took her oath, but her voice, while soft, was steady. "I thought he was safe," she began. She told them about the dinners, the late-night texts, the way he always knew what to say to make her feel special. She described the day she went to the doctor. The sterile room. The cold light. The moment Dr. Eckhart looked at her with something deeper than concern. And then she said it plainly. They found another woman's fingertip inside my body. You could hear a pin drop. She didn't cry. Not there. Not then. But her voice cracked when she said, I wasn't just a victim. I was a coffin. One juror covered their mouth. Another wiped at their eyes. Next, the prosecution called Detective Sarah Hanley. She testified to what she found in the apartment. The shrine. The freezer. The handwritten list, what she loved. She showed the jury the entry underlined 3 times. Red nails. And she read aloud one line from Nathan's journal. Brianna is different. She's soft. She'll carry Carmen better than I ever could. Hanley paused, let the silence weigh the words. This wasn't impulsive, she said. This was ritual. This was possession disguised as love. The defense tried one final appeal, that Nathan was delusional, not dangerous. That he collected, yes, but never meant to harm. That his past had built a twisted map, and he had simply gotten lost inside it. But no one bought it. Not after what he did. Not after what he kept. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. When they returned, no one looked at Nathan. Guilty. On all counts. First-degree murder. Abuse of a corpse. Sexual assault. Concealment of human remains. Judge Morrison, known for his restraint, stared directly at the defendant. You didn't just steal lives, he said. You turned people into property. You used human beings as shells for your grief. This court finds you not just guilty, but dangerous. Nathan showed no emotion. Not during sentencing. Not when they cuffed him. But as he stood to be let out, he turned once, just once, toward Emily. And he smiled. A small, ghostly curl of the lip. It wasn't joy. It wasn't regret. It was possession. And that would haunt her longer than anything else. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. April Wells spoke briefly. My sister didn't deserve what happened to her. But today she got her name back. Emily didn't speak. She simply walked to her car, locked the doors, and sat in silence for a long time. Justice had come. But peace would take longer. Justice is a verdict. Healing is a war. Emily Dawson didn't walk out of the courtroom and reclaim her life like someone flipping a switch. She walked out with a sentence in her chest. I wasn't just a victim. I was a coffin. And no amount of applause, no perfect conviction, no solemn nod from a judge could change how that felt beneath her skin. She didn't go back to work right away. The idea of fluorescent lights and routine email threads, of birthday cakes in break rooms and, how was your weekend? Questions. It made her stomach turn. The HR manager had been kind. Take all the time you need. But time didn't feel real anymore. Days blurred together like smudged ink. Sleep came in bursts. Dreams came loud. And her body, her own body, felt like it wasn't hers. Dr. Hannah Rooks, a trauma recovery therapist in Concord, had been referred by the District Victim Services Unit. Her office was small, pale green with warm light and soft rugs. Emily sat on the edge of the couch during her first session, fingers gripping the cushion like it was the last stable thing in her life. The sessions began with silence, then deep breaths, then halting words. Emily didn't talk about Nathan at first. She talked about laundry, about the smell of rosemary, about how she now hated her own bathtub. She talked about how she couldn't walk past nail polish displays at the pharmacy without her chest tightening. She once whispered, "He looked at me like I was something safe, while he was hiding someone else inside me." Dr. Rooks never flinched, never told her to be strong. She told her to be present, to sit in the discomfort, to slowly build a ladder back to herself. Emily cried in the shower more times than she could count. Not from pain, not even from memory, but from dissociation. There were moments, entire afternoons, where she'd forget what day it was, where she'd stare at her reflection, eyes red and puffy, and wonder whose body that was. She threw out every red thing in her apartment. Lipstick, dresses, a coffee mug, and most violently, the nail polish bottle in her medicine cabinet. It shattered in the sink. Red streaks across white porcelain. For a second it looked like blood. She didn't scream. She just backed away, slowly, and didn't enter that bathroom for 2 days. Some nights she stayed on the couch. Other nights she wandered the living room until 4 a.m., too tired to be awake, too wired to rest. She deleted every photo of her and Nathan. But she couldn't bring herself to delete the video he once sent her. A short clip of him cooking eggs, laughing, saying, "You calm me down, Em." She kept it in a hidden folder. Not out of love. Out of disbelief. How could someone say that, and still do what he did. Writing helped. Slowly. Dr. Rook suggested letters. One to Nathan, one to Carmen, one to herself. The letter to Nathan was never sent. You didn't just break me. You made me question everything I thought was safe. But I won't give you my future. You already took too much. The letter to Carmen was the hardest. I'm sorry I didn't know. I carried you unknowingly, but I'll carry your memory now, with intention. You deserved more than him. More than this. And the letter to herself? That one she folded and placed in her nightstand. Began with, "You were a victim, but you are not just that." 3 months later, Emily stood under soft lighting on the set of a small regional talk show. The host was kind. The cameras were discreet. She told her story not for drama, not to shock, but to warn. I ignored red flags, she said, because I was lonely, because he was kind, because I didn't want to believe that someone who touched me with care could be hiding something so evil. The audience was quiet. Some women cried. Some nodded hard. After the taping, a woman in her 60s approached, tears in her eyes, clutching her adult daughter's hand. "You saved someone today," she whispered. "Thank you for being brave." Emily didn't feel brave, but something inside her clicked, not healed but stitched. She began volunteering with a survivor support group in Manchester. Once a week, she met with young women at community centers talking not about staying safe, but about trust, intuition, boundaries. She never showed photos, never named Nathan, but her words carried a weight that needed no images. She still had triggers. The smell of rosemary, the sound of fingernails tapping on a counter, the word chef in a dating profile. But now she recognized them. She gave them names. She let them pass. She stopped fighting to forget and started reclaiming. Detective Sarah Hanley stayed in touch. Once a month they met for coffee. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in silence. Hanley had seen hundreds of cases, but this one stuck to her like tar. "You're stronger than anyone I've met in that courtroom," she once told Emily. "Most people disappear after what you went through. You stood up. You looked him in the eye." Emily nodded. "Some days, I wish I hadn't." Hanley smiled, a tired but steady smile. "But that's what gave Carmen justice." And Emily knew that was true. There would never be closure. But there could be clarity. And in that clarity, she found ground again. Shaky, cracked, but hers. 2 months after the sentencing, Nathan Bell stopped speaking. He no longer answered guards. He refused meals. He spent hours sitting on the floor of his cell, staring up at the ceiling like he expected it to answer. His hair had grown wild. His fingers, once precise, practiced in the kitchen, now twitched constantly, searching for something that wasn't there. The tip of his left index finger, the one he'd severed to match Carmen's, was raw, nerveless, a grotesque echo of the obsession that had consumed him. Even in prison, he ranked below rats. Other inmates, even killers, understood rage, revenge. But what Nathan did, desecration, violation, preservation, that was different. That was perversion. In the routine psychological observation logs, the guards began noting patterns in his muttering. One name repeated, Maya. Sometimes whispered, sometimes sung. Maya smiled. Maya didn't leave. Maya stayed. That name had never come up during the trial. Detective Sarah Hanley, now assigned to a federal task force for cold cases, flagged the name during a standard post-trial review. She ran it through the New Hampshire missing persons database and froze. Maya Sanderson, 24, reported missing in 2019. Last seen at a wine tasting event in Elmridge, an event where Nathan Bell had been hired as a private chef. There was no suspect, no body, no trace, until now. Hanley reopened the original case file. There it was, in fragile ink on an old field report. Maya mentioned trying Nathan's truffle sliders and taking his card. Witnesses said she left around 9 p.m. alone. No one saw her after that. The original detective had noted it but never pursued Nathan. There was no evidence. Just a charming food truck chef and a missing woman. Hanley stared at the name. Maya. The name that haunted a man already sentenced for life. A man who muttered it like a lullaby. That night, Hanley visited the evidence storage unit tied to Nathan's case. Most of it had been archived. The shrine, the freezer, the handwritten list. But one thing stood out. A journal page torn at the edge, not presented in court, recovered from a hollowed-out cookbook on Nathan's shelf. It was half a sentence, scrawled in frantic loops. Carmen was fire, but Maya, she was still. Still what? Still missing? Still inside something? Still somewhere? Back at her apartment, Emily Dawson lit a small candle by her window. She didn't sleep easily these days, but she'd learned to sit with the silence instead of fearing it. She read her own words, the letter she'd written months ago. You were a victim. But you are not just that. Outside, wind moved the tree branches like they were whispering. Inside, Emily placed a small photo next to the candle. A snapshot of Carmen, laughing, her red nails bright in the sun. You led me to truth, Emily whispered. I won't stop listening. 3 weeks later, a team of forensic analysts reopened Nathan Bell's encrypted hard drives. Most files had been reviewed, but one hidden volume, protected by a layered password system, had gone unread. It finally opened. Inside were video diaries, not just of Carmen, but other women, most unnamed, most smiling, most unaware they were being recorded. But one stood out. She had dark blonde hair, wore a pale blue dress, and in the clip she was laughing, reaching out of frame toward someone off camera. Nathan, stop. You're filming again. The date stamp. August 2019. The file name. M_Sanderson_final. The video cut off after 17 seconds. Henley watched the clip on loop, paused on her face, enlarged the eyes, matched it with Maya's missing persons photo. Confirmed. Another whisper. Another cry from a place no one thought to look. Later that month, cadaver dogs were deployed to a wooded area on the outskirts of Elmridge, a cabin Nathan had rented briefly under a shell company. Inside they found a second freezer, half buried beneath flooring. The seal was damaged. The power had long since died. Inside were items. A locket, a tooth, a strand of blonde hair wrapped around a cork, and a red wine-stained journal. One page had a drawing of a crooked heart, and a name scribbled in jagged pen. Maya. Back in Elmridge, a memorial bench was installed at the local park, a spot facing the river under the shade of a weeping willow, carved into the wood, in memory of Carmen Wells and Maya Sanderson. You are not forgotten. You are not erased. You are not silent. At the unveiling, Emily sat beside April Wells, Carmen's sister, now wearing a deep green scarf Carmen once gave her. Emily held a single lily in her lap. No cameras, no microphones, just stillness and presence. After everyone left, Emily remained. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The one Carmen had drawn for her, the one found tucked between the journals. A crooked heart, 2 stick figures, one word beneath it. Real. She traced the lines with her fingertip and whispered, You were real. He didn't get to decide who you were. We do. We remember you. Not as evidence, but as light. Behind her, a breeze moved through the trees. The chimes strung above the bench let out a single soft note. Carmen. Maya. He tried to silence them, but they were still speaking. Candle, sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens. Sometimes it comes in a fingertip, a name, a whisper, and the woman who refuses to forget.